Let's continue on with part 4 of chapter 2. This graph here, we're focusing on cocaine seizures and also the cultivation or the growing of the coca bush from which the cocaine comes. And you can see that this is showing the cultivation and seizures of cocaine over time going back to 2010 over here up to 2021 on the right side. Same with this graph to the right. So in our y-axis here, we can see we're talking about how much coca bush is being cultivated. So this is the amount of product and how it changes over time. Down below here, you can see that the dark blue part of the bar charts here, this is coca bush cultivation in Bolivia, the country of Bolivia in South America. The light color here, really light blue color, coca bush cultivation in Peru. This one here, a little bit darker blue, is Colombia. So let's take cultivation. First of all, you can see that the tendency overall over this period of about a decade plus has been increasing cultivation, and we can see that has been especially true in Colombia, which has been for a long time a center of cocaine production, cultivation. So we can see that's the biggest chunk here has been from Colombia. You see a significant contribution from Peru, and then a smaller contribution from Bolivia. So we're talking here South America, Colombia, the major player, and that production has been going up in Colombia. So the business is good. Business is good. Business has been increasing, particularly in Colombia. We can see when it comes to seizures, these lines here, this dark red line, cocaine seizures worldwide, that has been going up over time, especially the past since 2014. We see a pretty steep increase in the amount of seizures. This on the right hand side here, it's the cocaine seizures overproduction. So how much of this is being seized given a certain amount that's being produced. We can see that the seizures have been going up worldwide, and the blue here is for production, cocaine production, like worldwide, right? And so what's the story here? Up and up and up. That's the more production worldwide, and a focus on these particular South American countries, Colombia being number one. Now, if we look at the right-hand side, estimated supply of cocaine available for consumption, net of seizures, purity adjusted, per past year cocaine user worldwide. The y-axis here is grams of cocaine per past year user. So we can see that has dropped, that has dropped to a certain extent from the first year is 2005, bottoming out in 2015, and then increasing through 2021. And so what that tells us here is we're talking about per user. And so you see what seems to be a decrease and then an increase. But keep in mind that I don't believe that the UN provided a chart or information on concentrations. But what you see, here's a big historical trend, is you see over the years a tendency for whatever drug type to get purer and purer because of the technology, because of the lab work that's done, that the drugs have gotten purer and purer, and so you need fewer grams for people to get high. It's more intense drugs than in the past, and actually that's part of the problem. We'll get into that later, is that this greater concentration, this greater purity increases addiction. So that's a problem there. But you can see that it's been that availability per gram or grams per person went down and then it went up. So there's probably some complicated things going on there with greater concentrations, greater purity, and also issues of availability as well. This graph here, we see the focus is on cocaine again, seizures at the global level for the years 2020 through 2022. So this is just showing about where the action is, where the law enforcement is seizing cocaine in places around the world. The dots are going to tell you like how many seizures and the bigger the circles, the bigger the seizure. So basically, all we need to look for to get the big takeaway on a global map like this is, well, where do we see concentrations of the circles? And indeed, you can see Central America is seizing a lot of cocaine. South America, where a lot of this is produced, is being seized in that region. You can see also a lot of seizures in Mexico, and also seizures in the United States, especially in the Southwest and to some extent Southeast. You see here Florida, north of Florida, Texas here, and you see here from the southeast to the northeast and into Canada, you see concentrations. So basically, in the Western Hemisphere, you're seeing a lot of seizures, both where cocaine is being produced, where it is being transported, and where it is being consumed in the United States in the largest quantities. So it's especially a problem, and this to some extent follows the population centers in the United States. You got a lot of big cities, a lot of people in these areas, less so like where we live in say the Rocky Mountains, northern Rocky Mountains. Not as many people, but also not as much of a serious cocaine problem as well, trafficking problem as well. So that's the Western Hemisphere. You can see that Europe dominates seizures in that part of the world, much more so than any area in any other region. You can see a little bit in Western Africa here, but really look at that. And this is being seized at the sort of the consumption level, where it's being trafficked, retailed, sold to customers, and sort of it's not so much being made here. It's being moved in and consumed, and somewhere in that movement of drugs to the customer, it's being seized by law enforcement. So there's a lot of what that tells us. There's a lot of people in Europe who are using cocaine, and it's being seized at somewhere in the distribution of that drug toward the consumer. So again, you can see that what this points to is that you see a lot of production of this drug and distribution of drug in the poorer countries, and a lot of consumption of the drugs, particularly in wealthy areas where people have the money to be able to pay for drugs. Drugs are expensive, so it's very difficult to pay for them if you don't have any money. Okay, now next slide, we see that this is no switch over from cocaine to opium. Here we're talking about opium poppy, the plant that opium comes from, its cultivation or growth, raising it, and also the production of it from 1998 to 2022. So trends, again, the focus here is trends over time. The y-axis is opium production, how much in tons this opium is being made. And so then you can see that the colors down here, this green is like the area, how much area in the world is under poppy cultivation, how much land is being used to grow poppies. And then you get specific with certain countries that do a lot of opium production. Myanmar in Southeast Asia, also Laos, or it's referred to here as Lao PDR, also in Southeastern Asia, where a lot of opium is being grown. But then you can also see here, again in this dark reddish color, purplish color, You've got Afghanistan opium production. So that's a center as well. And you can see a little bit there in Mexico and and then this white part of the bars, other countries. So if we were to look just to get a big sense of where is this being grown, you can see that Afghanistan is an absolute center because the biggest portion of these bars is Afghanistan, and these other countries much smaller players, still players, but much smaller. So Afghanistan is the big story when it comes to opium. You can see our neighbor there, Mexico, has got small amounts, and those if you look at the green areas, dark green areas, those a little bigger over time as we move closer to the present in 2022. Again, Myanmar in this light color here, you've got, it's been just as kind of a player, but again, a small player. Same for Laos with this other green color, small little sections there. Again, so what's the big takeaway here? Well, if you're talking about countries, Afghanistan. If you're talking about trends, the big trend is you can see between 1998 to 2022, which is over 2 decades, say 2.5 decades, growth of more and more opium production, which means the world is consuming. People are using more poppy opium-derived drugs, like for example, heroin. So these are opiates. These are heavy-duty drugs, and it's been on the increase around the world. Again, this green color here shows how much land is being used to cultivate poppies. That's gone up over time. Overall, you see a lot of bouncing around, but we just want to go for the big picture. That's the big picture. Now, this simple graph here just shows that Afghanistan is not only a center for poppies, for opium, it's also a center for growing products for methamphetamine, or developing, I should say, in the lab. Methamphetamine is a lab drug. So it's being lab developed in Afghanistan, and this is the past few years here, 2019 to 2022, and you can see that there's a major player for Afghanistan is for methamphetamines, and that it's producing this drug and transporting it to many countries around the world. We could just rattle them off very quickly: Iran, Czechia, France, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. So here we're talking about Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan, these countries that are lower income countries, but you have wealthy countries like France, Hong Kong, another wealthy large city, Pakistan, Australia, Indonesia, Sri Lanka. So a lot of this Afghanistan meth is headed to eastern part of the world: India, United Arab Emirates, Eastern Africa, Bahrain. See, so it's not really this Afghan meth is not really making it, for example, much to the United States, because we're getting it from other sources. But the eastern part of the world, a real center for this drug is Afghanistan. So that definitely should be in your memory and your understanding, is that Afghanistan is a major drug player here. It has been for a long time. Let's see, harm related to delta H-THC recorded in the United States. So here we've got one come back home to our own country. What do we mean when we're talking about delta H-THC? Well, we're talking about a type of drug that comes from hemp. So here we're talking about THC is the drug, the psychoactive drug in marijuana. But here, this is lab-created THC, which comes from, in labs, it comes from hemp, and is, through lab processes, is made into a form of THC, which gets marketed and consumed by Americans. And again, a lot of times the stereotype is that anything that's THC, that's cannabis related, is, doesn't do any harm. That's what a lot of people tend to think. But what they're showing is that there's certain indications here of the problematic use of this particular product, which, by the way, ends up a lot of times in gummies. It can be legal in various states, and it can be purchased in the form of gummies or in vape cartridges. It can be vaped. So the Food and Drug Administration during this period of time, 20 to 22, has 104 reports of adverse events, hallucinations, vomiting, tremors, anxiety, dizziness, confusion, loss of consciousness, negative effects that can sometimes you can sometimes see with cannabis related products. 2,362 exposure cases, unintentional exposure among pediatrics. So kids getting exposed to unintentionally to this drug. Now, again, we need to keep this in context that there's over 330 million people in the United States. So if over, 3 years, say a 3-year period, 20, 21, 22, that if you have 140 reports of adverse events, we need to keep that in context. That's not many. That's a small number for a big country like the United States. If we're talking about the age of the individuals, you see here it's most of the time it's adults, but sometimes you can get kids exposed or a certain percent where they didn't have data on the age of the person, but it's mostly adults. So we're referring here to adverse events where something bad goes from the use of this stuff, and this stuff is thought to be, milder than other forms of THC. But sometimes this coming out of a lab, you can get sometimes impure products, other chemicals in there, or the high can be much stronger than anticipated. Here we see again that it's mostly adults here. It's mostly adults. So this is the data that's coming from different places. This is the FDA. This is the National Poison Control Center. So we're talking about sort of problematic use of this drug. Again, mostly adults. From the FDA, 55% required intervention from a hospital. So, over half of them, slightly over half of them, were serious enough events where you had to go see a doctor, go to the ER. And here you had 64% of them that required some sort of healthcare facility evaluation. So again, where you're getting medical help because of a bad reaction, a bad response, a bad event connected to this. So again, this can be a problem for some folks, but again, when we're talking about hundreds or even a couple thousand cases, when you have tens of millions of people using these THC-related drugs, you have to keep it in context that it's not as common as you might think just from the raw numbers. Looking at 2,000, say over 2,000, it sounds like a lot, but again, in context, you got to remember that the United States is a very big country. Okay, let's stop there. We'll continue on later.